Good afternoon, how are you doing?
Good.
So what, you just came over last night, you got a tour starting with Devin Townsend in 2 days through Europe. Are you looking forward to that?
Absolutely. Tour's been getting a lot of good talk about it. Yeah. So people are jammed and excited about it, so let's see how it goes.
So, earlier in the year you just released The Industrialist, which was a pretty different album for Fear Factory because it was just you and Dino together recording it with Reese
Holder
and programmed drums.
Yes.
So is this the future of Fear Factory?
It definitely seems like it's definitely an easier way to work. Dino and I have always been the forefront of the band and the main generator of music and concepts, and so with us just with just the two of us working, it really simplified the process, and we were able to focus a lot more. And with Reese's input as I call him the satellite, the three of us really created a record that to me is truly a Fear Factory album. It makes sense, and it was a great way to work.
So, are you interested in having permanent bass players and the drummer in the future, or is it just going to be sort of touring positions?
Well, we'll see what happens. We wish people to stay with us, and Mike Heller and Matt DeVries are great, but when it comes to recording, we've learned that we don't need a live drummer because since Digimortal, and the onset of Pro Tools, everything, when the drummer records into the Pro Tools, every hit is moved anyways, and that would just waste a bunch of time. So it ends up being programmed anyway, just with live sound. So what's the point? So we just cut to the chase and program it, and that seemed to make things a lot easier.
So, your last two albums have been pretty aggressive albums. Do you think in the future you might experiment a bit more again?
Of course, experimentation is always a part of the ingredient of Fear Factory, and that'll continue to ring true. But as far as aggressive and power, it wouldn't be a Fear Factory album without those two ingredients.
Okay, well, I've been a fan for quite a number of years, so I've got a few questions about the history of the band, if you don't mind.
Oh my! I hope my old man remember all of it.
So, Fear Factory has always been sort of ahead of its time. Especially with your earlier stuff. So, what influenced you?
There was a lot of influences from bands in the early days that we looked towards for inspiration, and in some ways they were in itself ahead of their time, yet very timely at that same moment. And bands like Killing Joke, bands like Ministry, Godflesh, Napalm Death, bands that were in the moment but still creating a sound that was fresh, and for that reason bands like that influenced Fear Factory to move forward. And we took all this knowledge plus our own inspiration and our own capabilities and put it all into the pot. And that's how with that in mind you're able to create something new. And the fact that Dino and I work hard, and the fact that we really strive for greatness. We really want to be individuals. We want to be something new, and with our own talents and mixing in our inspiration, Fear Factory came about.
So at what point did you think, wait here, Fear Factory could be, pretty big?
When I started working with Dino. It was a long time ago, even right when Dino and I first started working together, I knew that I was like, wow, there was an instant chemistry that I noticed right then. And I knew, I was like, I'm going to stick with this guy and see where it takes me, because I feel that we could do something.
And did you think, when you'd released Demanufacture, that you'd still be playing, so many songs from that album? How many years down the line now?
I don't think about those things. I just take each day as it comes. But I feel fortunate that I'm able to play that record, and a lot of it. It's it is one of our most popular albums, and fans love it. And live, the songs translate very well.
Okay, so what was it like meeting and work with one of my favourites, Gary Newman, when he did Cars?
Man, I never thought I'd be in that position. You know, I remember in 1980, 79 or 80, when I first, probably 80, when Cars actually came out on the radio, and I was living in a, little bumfuck town in East Texas, and that song came on, and I was like, wow, that's a cool song, and it was, you heard it all the time, and I never thought I'd be in that position. Like, I'm not only meeting Gary, but I'm working with Gary. I'm working with this legend and someone I've looked towards for inspiration as well. And so, in my Fear Factory career, I've had a lot of cool moments where, as a fan of music myself, I'd be like, wow, that's wicked.
How do you look back on the Digimortal album, considering that however many people think that it's quite nu metal and it was more commercial?
Well, it's a bittersweet record, and don't get me wrong, it is a good album, and but for that time period, the band was really forced into a position where we're just coming off a gold record from Obsolete. New management that was really pushing it to be something more than the band actually was, which was like a radio band. And I'll tell you this, you should have heard the demos of Digimortal, because it was much more raw and powerful. The actual recording of Digimortal ended up being more polished, and for that reason, that's why it sounded nu metal. But Fear Factory was being what it always was. But there was some couple other ingredients. There's a lot of good songs on that record, and there's a lot of great moments on that album. And there are some good songs. I just, the production of it, and the label pushing the band to where it wasn't supposed to be, just kind of put a bad taste in the band's mouth in general.
So was the original split in 2002 harder, that you were probably at the sort of height of your commercial success at that time?
There was a lot of reasons for it, and in some ways it's necessary, in some ways it's regrettable, but we're here where we are now because of it.
So, the Transgression album, that's a lot more experimental, and it is divided opinion. How do you stand on that, sort of 6-7 years down the line?
It was that was the most experimental Fear Factory record to date, even outside of the remixes, because Transgression is Fear Factory's rock album. But the title in itself explains the record. It's a transgression of Fear Factory, of what it's always been. And, and if you take that in consideration, it makes sense. But there are some good tracks on that record, but I can see what a lot of fans talk about. It's very atypical of a Fear Factory album, and it might have turned a lot of fans off. But in turn, we did gain a lot of fans because of it.
Yeah, well, I read that it was quite rushed as well.
It was a rushed record, and and it was very, that was a very interesting time period of the band's history, internally.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Can I ask why you don't really tend to play songs from that album or the Archetype album?
There are a couple good, couple tracks that we would like to play, but all in all, it's just, Dino would rather play songs that he played on,
yeah.
And I can see why.
Have you thought about a new remix album with some of the newer songs all sort of technoed up?
Absolutely, and it's things we've already been working on. But slowly, we do have some remix versions of songs on the new record, and the last record. We're just kind of stockpiling, but we do have remixes already, and it's something that when we find the right outlet for it, we'll release them.
So, looking back over the history of the band, what's the one thing that you would change?
the record contract I signed with Roadrunner Records.
Why is that?
Because I know more now than I did then, and that's
They were just pushing you to be something that you didn't want the band to be. Or?
No, I wasn't. I was just too naive to know that I could make things better.
Okay. So, which one is your favourite Fear Factory album then?
Wow.
And you can't say the new one.
I can't. There's a lot of, every record has a good moment on it, and I'm proud of each record for different reasons. And making each record had hardships and high moments. I don't know. Obsolete was a good record. It was fun to do. Had good moments, and it was definitely, probably the most elaborate record we made making at the same time.
Concept album.
Conceptually, it really took Fear Factory to another level.
So, I've got to ask, you being in an industrial metal band, have you heard the new Morbid Angel album?
I have not personally heard it, but
You've heard.
I've heard about it, and I'm not going to make any judgment until I hear it myself.
Okay.
But I'm a fan. I do like Morbid Angel, and Dave Vincent's a good mate of mine. So, I haven't heard it honestly, but I wait to hear it.
Okay. Well, thanks for your time. Do you have any last words for the people watching this?
If you're going to be around in the UK in December, Fear Factory's coming back, co-headlining with Devin Townsend, another good friend and masterful artist. So, if you haven't seen us yet, come check us out. It'll be worthwhile.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Pleasure.